Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. I'm Tom Dutta, your host. And hey, we're live streaming today. It's the next generation of broadcasting. If you want to click the subscribe button to the YouTube channel, if you're on there, you'll get access to the future of the Quiet Warrior Show when this episode comes out. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter today. And I'm excited to bring into the studio in just a moment our guest. And this one's going to be special. Going to have a few tricks and surprises. You want to stay till the very end. And when you when the show comes out, it'll be released in future as a podcast across an international network and as a YouTube video premiere. Give the show a rating, and particularly this episode, so we can do more of these and we can honor the guest. So I'll bring into the studio now my guest, Mr. Grant Tate. Grant, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here, Tom. I'm really looking forward to this exciting episode.
Yeah, we've had some fun getting here, and everybody. Grant is in Virginia. I'm in the West Coast of Canada. And something you told me in the green room about how we speak. Why don't you just share that with the audience?
Yes, I say OU as in loud, out, and about.
Yeah. So Grant asked me, he said, say out. And I'm going like, okay, excuse me, who's the host here? What are you doing the sound check for? And I said out. And then he let me know that the way we speak in Canada, particularly, and Virginia is the same kind of thing. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Grant, you and I met through something that I'm going to hold up here, which I was fascinated by. Everybody, I'm going to put this full screen in here for a minute. And there it is. It's a book Grant's written called Hand on Shoulder. We're going to talk a lot about that book, but I usually don't pitch books. But this one weaves into the story today. So let me just close that down. Before we get started, Grant, I just want to tell everybody a bit about you. Grant, well, first of all, he's a award-winning author, a servant leader, transformational coach, business consultant. He helps people learn how to thrive in a chaotic world, challenges leaders and emerging professionals. He has a question for you today. Who am I? And what am I called to do now? So there are lots of great things in here. Grant lives in Charlottesville, Virginia with wife Ann Colleen. I hope I said that right, Grant.
Ann Colleen.
Ann Colleen, beautiful.
Right.
His children, Laura Lynn and David, live in American Northeast and West. So now that we've told everybody about you, welcome.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here. It's a real pleasure, Tom.
Yeah, I'm excited. And yesterday was Thanksgiving in Canada. So we're going to tell you that in just a little while, everybody, you want to stay on to see this. I teased Grant, right? Grant, you saw this alone. I said, I'm a home chef. I'm going to go into my kitchen and I tend to create dishes visually based on my guests. And so I've created a dish that tells a story about what I think Grant is, and based on what I've read about his book. So Grant, let's get into that story. Let's get into the story. When we had you come on the show, I challenged you and I said, what's your hero's journey? What's the setbacks and the challenges that got you to where you are? And you wrote me a very simple paragraph. So just get into that and take us back to the very beginning of life. Just tell us a bit about your early years.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Virginia, a town called Orange. It's just a few miles from where I'm sitting right now. It had 3,000 people then, and it's roughly 3,000 people today. Doesn't mean it's backward, but grew up in a middle-class family. Had a fortunate upbringing that I had great relationships with 4 grandparents who were mostly from rural areas. But that legacy, I think, has stuck with me.
Yeah.
In particular, I had a grandmother who, Sunday school teacher in a small rural town outside of Orange, who said, if you have a talent and you're not using it, it's a sin. And I use that as sort of the driving forces for my early part of life, that my gosh, I'm going straight to hell if I don't work.
I gotta just jump in because we don't script this, as you know, and my brain's multidimensional. I just visualize the Ten Commandments tablet in Moses' hands coming out of the burning bush, saying that thou shalt not, thou shalt not use his talent or whatever. He just
Yeah, thou shalt not waste a talent, right?
wasted talent. That's too funny. I want to hold the book up and just show the first page here beautifully. Grant actually signed this for me. So everybody, I'm going to just do a pitch. You want to get this book and read it. But Grant, it says this book is dedicated to my brother, Warren S. Tate, who has given me and so many other people a much needed hand on the shoulder. As you're talking about your beginnings, talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, he's Warren lives in Texas. We had an unusual upbringing in a way, I suppose, because he's my only sibling and he's 10 years younger. And I graduated high school when I was 16 and went to college at 17.
Yeah.
And he was just 7 years old. So our closest relationship has really come since we are adults. And we do personal assessments, and one of the things that's interesting about us is we are complete opposites in the way we make decisions. I tend to be quick.
Yeah.
He tends to be deliberate. So if I have a tough decision, guess what? I consult with my brother. And one of the cases when he was first married, he called up and he said, "Well, Grant, we're trying to buy a refrigerator." And he went through lots of analysis, and I don't know if he did a spreadsheet then, but he would have.
Yeah.
And after several sessions like this, and I said, "Warren, from here in, it's an emotion. Just buy it."
I think I must be like your brother. For sure that's how I think. So we're going to be
Yeah.
opposite today. Keep going.
Yeah, but it illustrates to me, I think, in this sort of simple relationships, something about leadership, because we need those opposites. We need diversity in the people that are around us, whether we're at work or whether in the personal life. And that diversity is really crucial to creativity and crucial to good decisions. So in a case like mine, and advice to someone like me is, hey, slow down. Just don't make a snap decision because it can be mistaken. On
Yeah.
the other hand, if we're in a place and it catches on fire, and I shout, "Fire! There's the door." That's the advantage of a quick decision maker.
That's
So
yeah, if I can just jump in there that's amazing. I remember somebody telling me it was actually when it gets hot up here, we buy air conditioning units like many people do, and I think you have Costco, the big almighty Costco in
right,
America.
yes.
Yeah, we have them here too, eh? We but I've managed to get a hold of Danby Appliances, the head of the company for whatever
Mm,
reason, and interviewed him, and he said something like, he said there's two types of CEOs. I'd like to get your perspective. He said there's a wartime and a peacetime.
yep.
And this was pandemic, right? And so everything was just going haywire. And he said during wartime, you've got to literally imagine that your team, the people around you, they're panicking. Maybe they haven't seen this journey. So you got to be more directive. Like you got to be a Grant, like, we got to
Hmm.
do this. Versus in peacetime, you can empower and let people. So I would imagine that if you and I work together, I would probably learn from your strengths as being that decisive. That's my secondary part of my personality.
Mm.
So I love how you said that, Grant. To me, it just made sense. It's about honoring people's strengths and realizing that you hire smarter people around you for that reason. What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. And a good example is a story in the book. I was sent to do a turnaround job with a big software lab. We had 900 people, all programming code and
Yeah.
writing a big logistics program for IBM. And I was asked to go out, and we knew the place was in trouble. And my leader, a vice president, said, "Grant, go out there and look around 30 days and come back and tell me what you want to do." And I went back and after interviewing every manager in the place and doing some studies, and went back and said, here's what I found. Here's the program." He said, "How long is it going to take?" And I said, 2 years. And 18 months, we'd met all the objectives, and I went back, carried the charts back, and said, check, 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 check. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want a new job. And so the next person that came into that job was a steady manager.
Yeah.
He wasn't a turnaround guy. And so there's a time and a place for everything. But in doing that job, even sort of the driving turnaround guy, I had a team around me, some critical advisors who could help me think through and understand the culture. And those were absolutely critical to making things work.
Yeah, that's everybody. That's a teaching moment. We're with Grant Tate. He is the author of a book. Grant, we're going to full screen. You hold that book up and just read out the title again.
It's Hand on the Shoulder: Finding Freedom in the Confluence of Love and Career.
Yeah, I want to ask you, some could say that I read it from cover to cover. Everybody get this book. And by the way, author's work gets known if we post a review on Amazon or goodreads.com. We need to do that for Grant. Would the word memoir fit here? It seems like it was a memoir of your life.
It is indeed a memoir. And the story behind it was a year and a half ago, I had a call from a publisher that said, I've seen some of your writing. Have you ever thought of writing a book? And I said, yeah, everybody has. And so, yeah. And then after several discussions, I decided I didn't want to write the 50,001st business book, because that's how many business books are published every year. And therefore, let's write a memoir. And but it's a memoir that I tried to design as having lessons that people can use in their life and in their career. So it has 108 little stories, some longer, some short, but it's designed so you could pick it up and read a story and say, "Oh, there's a lesson there."
Sorry, go ahead, Grant.
But if you look at the total flow of it, I call it a spiral up, where I was, as David Brooks, who wrote a book called The Second Mountain, he described the first mountain as when we were driving in our career, going up the ladder, building a family, and then a lot of people hit the wall, have issues, and then sink to the valley, and then have to climb the second mountain. And the second mountain is finding out who you really are. What do I believe in? And what do I do now?
Yeah.
And so that's the flow of the story.
Yeah, I love it. So everybody, we started with the early part of Grant talking about his early life. I want to just, maybe you can follow along with me, Grant, or if you have the book there, but page 3. And I want to talk about what Grant said, everybody. Grant, you nailed it. This book, when I started reading it, I have right now from a brain injury in 2018. I fell in a bathtub. I've got double vision. I've got light sensitivity, and I have difficulty reading. What I loved about the book was I started reading it and I went, yes, I finished a chapter and dopamine was rushing in my brain. And everybody, it's written that way. It's exactly that. They're little 2-3 page stories. So I could do a story and I could choose to put it down, but I wanted to keep doing more stories. So I love the way it's written. And page 3, it says, why don't you just read out that paragraph to us?
It is left to me now to untangle the intricate web of events that set me on my slow downward slide. At the time, I was completely unaware that my support system was rotting from within and without. I did not feel the first molecule of rust that formed on my girders. I knew that something was missing and had searched for it in forbidden places, but had no idea what was driving me, no idea of my growing thirst for intimacy, no idea that my path was anything but the right one.
All right, so I'm going to set this up for you, catch the story and put it in fast forward. By the way, I love listening to audiobooks and putting it in 1.5 times so I can tell my friends I'm a speed reader. You can. I'd like you just to lean in and listen to a few things I'm going to say and then talk about it to us. First of all, that paragraph, get us into what the deep meaning of that is. I read a lot about your father, and your early years growing up. And I believe he was a manager. And what I really liked about part of the story is your father didn't have the perspective you needed that you maybe desired to take as you went into, I think you talk about IBM a lot in the book, one of your first corporate gigs. And so talk about that paragraph and your father and how they say, and I'd like you to agree or disagree, that we're shaped by the beliefs or the things that we learn in our early years. We're not defined by it. Talk about those things.
Yeah, as when I was growing up, there was a textile mill in my hometown called the American Silk Mills. And he was a manager of a department there. And my memory was that he was working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
What was his name?
And that American Silk Mills.
Your father.
Oh, his name was Wesley Tate.
Okay.
And so he would come home and generally we would sit around the dinner table and he would tell some stories about his day, most of which were talking about the people involved, who was working in his team, some of the difficulties they had, some of the people that he worked with, and the particular problems they were facing, and so that had a big factor in shaping my life, because if you put that with what my grandmother said, then to me, him working with people was a great thing to me. He's helping people, but he's working in this factory.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people said about him when he died in 1969 was, excuse me, it was 1982. He was the lights went out in Orange when he died, because he was the person who was basically helping people in lots of small ways. So that had a big impact on me, and I had decided early on that, hey, I'd like to be a manager somewhere. Wasn't quite sure where. I wasn't sure going into engineering was part of that, but it turned out to be the path. And so I became a manager of a department at age 22 in IBM, which was pretty remarkable at the time. Built on the fact that I was one of the technical people in manufacturing at the time when the new technology was just arriving.
Yeah. I read a little bit in the book there about one of the rooms, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the bricks covered the walls, but you be able to look out into the yard or whatever where all this work was being done. And my mind started riffing and thinking, like, my goodness, we're talking to somebody here who saw the beginnings of the era of computers. I think that was before even the personal computer. I want to challenge you on this in a good way, that I've been doing a lot of work on brain science, neuroscience, because of my recovery from an injury. And all my life, Grant, that's why I loved your book and I love you, is that there were threads in your story that made me emotional, made me go like, man, that's me. I was a manager at the age of 21. My early life wasn't as good as yours because my dad was a very bad addicted alcoholic and a military man. So he's very violent. However, I remember they say that because up to age 25, we don't use our rational part of our brain, the frontal lobe, that everything we hear is truth. And so a lot of children grow up and they have these thoughts in their neural nets, their thought patterns that somebody else put in there. You should be a doctor, you should be this, you should be that. And I went through my life seeking. I went through the life seeking significance. I went seeking, and I went in manager early too, and then higher levels, CEO. And I remember I kept getting riches, and I had a nice pension and a nice lifestyle, but there was a hole in my soul and I wasn't fulfilled. And I faced that question that you posed so well in your book about, what am I? Or there was a chapter in here that was remarkable. I faced that midlife, that I really was lost. I didn't quite know. I wanted to serve people, but I didn't know the way to do it. It wasn't with the things that I believe that were passionate for me. It was because of what somebody else wanted. Talk a bit about that, because the career at IBM went very well, but you ended up on a sabbatical in New Mexico. Talk a bit about that, those chapters.
Yeah, one thing I want to tell the listeners and viewers is that they need to see your TED Talk,
Oh, thank
because
you.
that your TED Talk is remarkable, and it's something everybody needs to see. It's a wonderful job you did, and you did a great benefit for humanity in telling your story. And I want to
Awesome.
thank you for that.
God bless you for saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And so my story is a little different, but I went on that sabbatical primarily because I'd been on this turnaround path, this driving path for a while, and I said, okay, it's time to take a break. And I went to New Mexico, and I would have stayed in New Mexico if it hadn't been for the fact that my ex-wife now said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to the East Coast, and I had to choose to stay in New Mexico or go back. But when I arrived back at IBM, I was put into a strange, somewhat impossible job. In other words, I was off the fast path,
Yeah.
and so I faced the disappointment. My relationship with my wife was in sad shape, and eventually I found myself in a therapist's office, and that's described also in the book in a chapter, and that that particular event described there was the beginning of several years of therapy, trying to figure out who in the heck am I.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this was that I had a friend in HR, human resources in IBM, who noticed that there were executives who were taken out of their job for some reason and had never been told why, and that psychological issues, family issues were rife in that population. They looked at 19 different people
Wow.
and found that the common thread was they were never told. And so, thinking about that story, I said, "Oh my gosh, I was one of those," because I had no idea where I was.
Yeah.
And the hand on the shoulder title came from the introduction to the book, which was the announcement of my father's death while I was at a meeting in New Mexico, and
Oh,
one of
goodness.
my friends, the dean of my business there, came into the conference room, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "Grant, you have a phone call." And then then they followed my journey back to the East Coast to take care of things. But I've asked myself, people lose parents,
Yeah.
okay. But it hit me at a time when other things were going on that
Yes.
just compounded me saying, oh my gosh, I'm really alone. And the thing that happened to me and the difficulty with my wife and relationship is I had isolated myself where I had zero people to talk to, none. And I wasn't bright enough in those days to go directly to a therapist. I developed into another bad relationship, and finally, after many years, finally said, I've got to confront myself and get out of this.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I'm sorry for the loss of your dad. I know it goes back, but each time you have to tell that story, you relive it.
Mm.
There's so many things, everybody, teaching moments in there. And Grant, just hold up the book again while I talk about some of those things. We're with the author of Hen on the Shoulder, and it's Grant Tate's new book. There is so much in there. I just want to, I don't like the word unpack, but speak to it,
Mm.
because my mind went on a journey. First thing is therapy. Uh, Having been through that, what was a trigger for you to say, I need to go work this out? What was the trigger? Was it shame? Was it anger? Was it uh feeling of, like you said, loneliness? Or because sometimes ego gets in the way.
It was me just facing a crisis. I went to the airport, LaGuardia, in New York City,
Yeah.
and just froze. I couldn't get on the plane.
Wow.
And so then the next step is my second wife got me to the hospital, and that began the journey.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to riff on that a bit more. So there Grant was, and IBM is not an easy place to work. Corporate America is, and I've been there. And I always used to say that, nobody looks after your future. You have
Yeah.
to look after yourself. But it's a very why I like reading that part of your book, Grant, is they say when you make somebody feel the way you do through a story, it connects them deeply. And I went back to a time where I was. I'm just going to tell you this for context, that I was working for about a $10 billion telecom. I was recruited in by a headhunter, and I was in a very solid, stable job in another industry, financial services. And they had just made this major merger. I've been through about 10 or 11 mergers, transactions. Some failed, some didn't.
Mm.
And I'm a young guy. I'm in my early 30s, and they give me this big role and working directly for the company. The company spent too much cash. They had a new strategy put in place to turn the company from traditional telephony, so twisted copper pair, they call it, the wires and phone, into data, internet, and all this stuff. And the company faltered. And so
Mm.
we were having to, we were put on a SWAT team, and they called it Fueling Your Future, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And we were put in a room, and we were taken for dinner, 40 of us, and said, you're going to have Boston Consulting Group assigned to you. And the CEO stands up and says, I need you to drive 500 million in costs and 4,000 heads, people, out of the company in 90 days. So
Whoa.
we went stealth across the enterprise. People didn't know what we were doing. The short side of the story is I delivered my plan, 300 people. I think it was 40 million in cost. It was the hardest work I'd ever done because I'm intimacy, my personality type. I struggle because I've connected to people and ending people's careers. However, Grant, 2 or 3 weeks later, after the bloodletting happened, I'm put in an elevator to go up to my boss's office. He's chief operating officer, to do a PowerPoint presentation. I get to the top of the elevator, and I'd worked all night on this thing, my perfectionism, worrisome. So, and they said, oh, you're going to be meeting in this room. And they put me in a room, and then HR walked in, and they had an envelope, and they fueled my future.
Oh,
And
great day. Whoa.
that's what I connect to when you read the story. It is a cruel world. They didn't tell me why. And in that moment in time, and I know I'm going on a bit, but I want to do this to get you into it. I carried shame and guilt for a long time for that, wondering why did I fail what I do. And I had these thoughts back to my father, who would usually say things like, you're not enough, or you're not good enough unless you're perfect. And it took me a while to get through that. So I want to just say I honor you for telling everybody. I have a therapist, a psychiatrist in my care team. Everybody should have one, because we go through these cycles where we need people to walk with us. So you had your marriage situation, and then you had your dad die, and things were going on in your head. Where were your fingerprints on the marital failure? What could you see that if you went back, you could do different?
Well, first of all, I was so contained in myself. I was not telling her what was going on or sharing what was happening
Yeah,
in reality and inside. So I became isolated by my own choice, but yet felt that isolation was sort of part of the growing up and becoming a leader. A leader is out there in front. You
that's
can't
right.
over communicate, right? And of course, that is just a false concept. Uh, and one of the things I would say today and do say is, and that's part of the freedom I mentioned. You must have the freedom to be yourself as a leader or be authentic.
I like
And if
that.
you don't have that freedom, you're in the wrong place or have the wrong conditions. And so my fingerprints are all over that broken relationship. Now, it's always a two-way street,
That's right.
and so but basically, as I became so isolated, I didn't have anybody to talk to, including my own spouse. And what was driving that? Well, I had different messages than you did. My messages were you've got to be doing the right thing. You've got to be the leader. You're really got all these talents and capabilities, put them to work. And so what did I feel when I hit the end and then wasn't doing that? Guilt.
Guilt.
And so part of writing this was me still confronting that to say, let me look back and see what in the heck could I have done better,
Yeah.
and what can I do better now?
Well, I'm going to share something on the screen. We have a fan who wrote this. It's funny. The universe sends messages at the perfect time. Look at this.
Yeah.
K. Monroe, Grant, so grateful for your transparency. I mean, that's what you were just saying. You were saying that, you were being transparent about your story of feeling guilt. One of the things I learned, Grant, in my own brain recovery is that shame and guilt are in the same part of the brain.
Yeah.
And shame can take you in a very dark place. Guilt, you can, if I miss your birthday party and I'm healthy, I might call you and say, hey, sorry, I messed up. Let's go for coffee.
Right.
But shame can really do some things. Would it be fair to say that that thought pattern connected back to really what your dad instilled in you? And I think dads do the best with what they have, but they don't always understand the impact of their words. That you wanted to be like him, you wanted to be successful, you wanted to serve. I'd like to know what you think about this, but I believe that we need to tell our children, separate behavior from who they are. And as a child growing up, I wish my dad would have said, Tom, I love you. Tom, no matter what you do, man, no matter who you are enough. And son, I always want you to remember that, because my dad only talked about, because he was in the military, achievement. And so when I failed in my achievement, I tied it to me. I'm no good. Let me talk about a couple of things in the book and ask you to go back to it. There's a chapter in the book early. It's called Black Kid. And just read a piece of this. At age 6 or 8, I liked to play with toy soldiers. World War II was raging in Europe, the Far East, so I tried to simulate some of the small battles. One morning, sitting in front yard on Main Street, I assembled a fight between two toy platoons. A black kid, slightly larger than I, approached from down the street. I started feeling a bit nervous. I knew black and white people didn't mix, and I'd heard black people stole things. I looked at my toys, wondering if I should pick them up and run inside. Man, tell us about growing up in that, because you really were almost like in an apartheid type environment. Many people would never see that.
Yeah, that's and it's to me, looking back, still strange.
Yeah.
The culture was black and white separate, but yet at the same time, my dad, eventually me, had lots of African American friends, and so at the individual level, there's a black woman in my background named Rosa Graves, who was like my sister. She was a friend of the family and was there in family gatherings, and I was in hers, and so very close relationship. But yet, if you look at my father and that generation, was a strong believer in separation of the races.
Yeah.
And that was a paradox that was still hard for me to understand. So at the human level, one thing; at the social level, something else. And that story was an important event in my young life, because when so when that child saw, my friend saw my dad come to lunch, he ran away. And then I went in, sort of thinking I'm going to get, put down or criticized for playing with a black kid. My dad basically said, "Did you have fun?"
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Oh, that words of wisdom. Did you have
Yeah.
fun? There's so many parts of this book. There's another chapter, everyone, small kid, then, hometown mentor. These are just short little stories, an amazing book that you got to get. I really loved reading it. And want to really go to IBM for a minute, because you really rose to a level in IBM. I mean, first of all, I got to commend you. There's a lot in there. People, you got to read it. But IBM, large company, this man Grant really rose up to high levels of achievement. I remember saying to myself when my daughter was born and I was traveling and trying to climb the ladder myself, I'd rather be a frequent father than a frequent flyer.
Mm.
And I really like some of your thought process about, it's great to be successful, but at what expense? And sometimes we don't have the wisdom of knowing that until we read your book. So I hope every young person who wants to get into this corporate career reads this. The New Mexico thing, tell us why you really went there. There was a thread in the book about your son. I think it's homeschooling your son or something.
Yeah, that was a separate event, but I typically, I guess what I need sort of describe my IBM career in shorthand. I had 15 different management or executive jobs. And I only replaced 2 people. So basically, I was either starting or turning around an organization.
Wow.
And that meant if you look at 30 years divided by 15, that's 2 years. 2 years.
That's a lot of
job,
change, man.
Yeah, right. So I was in a job that I had been in almost 5 years, and I said, it's time to take a break. And so I decided I would take a sabbatical and went to New Mexico on a faculty loan program. Great experience.
Yeah.
I was working with Hispanic and African American and Native American people to try to encourage their children to come to engineering, and we were setting up programs for that. In addition, starting an organization to help small business startups there. So it was a great experience, and actually, I was that close to staying. And as I mentioned earlier, my wife didn't want to stay, and I had a choice: do I stay or not?
Yeah.
And that was a turning point.
That's the hard part because we talk about this a lot. My wife and I are 26 years married. I met her in the banking industry. We were both managers in one of the top 5 Canadian banks. And we really talk about that women have to make choices, right, with childbearing.
Right.
There was a time, I don't know if it's a generational thing, where it was just the woman followed the man. If his career went everywhere, you just followed. But then women want to have their own career and they have their own decisions. It's hard. I was reading something about the Industrial Revolution, and I didn't think about this perspective because I'm not that old. But Brett, when cars didn't exist in road systems, a lot of families were farming families. So they worked really hard, and then at night they sat at the dinner table together, and the father was there and the mother. Industrial Revolution hits, the Ford car, the road systems, and then all of a sudden, I guess the dad ended up having to leave and go to work, and all that pressure left on top of the wife. What a shift. And it's probably one of my biggest regrets, if I have one, about my career. And I said to my daughter, and I'll give it back to you on this, because I want to hear about how you parented, or wisdom we're parenting children through this. When my daughter left for university, she's in engineering the other side of our country. This is 4 years ago. She was accepted to 5 universities, and I'm going like, yes, like every daughter, she's going to stay here. And when she's leaving, she sat on my lap and she looked at me, and I said, why did you choose to go the other side? And she said, well, you were never here. And it was like it was this gut punch, and I can't cry. It's part of my issue. I'm still digging into. It was really emotional for me. And I started reflecting. I read something in your book, 5-year reflection. I think everybody, but I started reflecting, Grant, and I realized that I made choices for wealth and for money and for my own significance at a cost. So maybe there was a way I could have done both. I don't know. Tell us about your kids and just any nuggets about how you still manage to be a good parent. I know, but getting through this when you're a corporate executive.
I guess what I would say is we are probably closer now than we've ever been as adults.
Awesome. Yeah.
But I had the same thing happening to me. When I was working international work with IBM, I was out of the country 40% of the time. I was going to Europe 18 times a year, not counting going to Latin America and whatever. So that was a lot of time. So The incident mentioned in the book where my son had trouble in school at high school years.
Yeah.
And so basically, I put myself on no-fly zone for the semester and homeschooled him, which was a very interesting experience. He was in a private school, but
Yeah.
his grades got better than the people in his classmates because of homeschool.
That's awesome. How old was
Yeah,
he?
he was let's see, third year. No, he was
That's
third year
fantastic.
high
I
school.
love it.
Yeah. So let me change the flow just a little bit and reach out to Kay Monroe. You saw Kay's picture there, and there I don't know how many of the people I send invitation to might be out there, but Kay Monroe, another woman who might be there is Moselle Booker. These are both African American women, uh, like my sisters, and one of the things that has been so important, I think, in trying to understand what's going on in today's society is uh, being able to help each other by being interpreters of how we see things, how we think about things, how we solve problems. And so people like this would bring joy to my life.
She's sending you love there on the screen. We just put up a
Yeah,
comment from Kay Monroe. The brilliance of doing live streaming. There you have Kay Monroe. That's a
yeah.
beautiful story, and it's one of the things that we see in Grant's book. And Grant, hold it up again. We're going to full screen you. He's the author of this book, "Hen on the Shoulder," is about being a servant. And I like that idea of perspective. Grant, somebody told me, I remember when I became a CEO myself, or age 31, I was early, and I didn't really know what it was. And then somebody gave me a book, and it said "Becoming a CEO and Staying at the Top." And and then it said, here's something. It said, when the CEO sneezes, the office catches cold. And it's like, man. And now that we're trading stories, I got to tell you, because it got me angry when I thought about it. There was a part of your book where you had asked for a couple days. I think it was to go to a wedding or to do something from one of your managers at IBM. You're new, and it didn't go over very well.
Yeah,
And that's
right. Yeah,
right. And that's
yeah,
part of the thing about, do you work for yourself or work for somebody else's dream?
yeah. That's right. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I was having because of the way I was pushing myself for significance and climbing the ladder, I was getting sick inside. I was actually, I remember you said, rotting inside. That's what was happening. I had some health issues, young guy. And so I had to fly from Vancouver to a board meeting. We did our board meetings in Baltimore, Maryland, but this one was in Florida. And there was a big golf tournament, and we were to take our clients, the heads of our clients, for this golf tournament, the day of business meeting the company. And I was fatigued. So when I got in, I actually didn't attend the reception. And the reception was by the president of, the parent company. And instead I went and got a massage at the spa. And my boss caught that. I told him, he said, "Where were you?" And this is what happened. And I never forget it.
Yeah.
One of the board members, because in golf, took me out in the golf cart and said, "I want to talk to you." And he just ripped me. He scared
Mm,
the hell out of me. And when he did that, he became my father, because I have PTSD from the abuse my
mm.
father put out on me. And
Oh my.
he said this, Greg, he said, "If you want to be the man, you got to be in two places at once." And I go, what the I had no idea what that meant.
Mm,
Now, I'm not going to tell you the answer today. We'll have you back maybe, but I learned later in life what that really meant. But this is the unforgiving part about arrogant, narcissistic bosses who put pressure top down on employees.
mm.
And everybody, one of the things that I read in about it, Grant's Bio, you're a consultant. So you spend a lot of your time giving wisdom and consulting. And I just think that these are some of the most important messages you have in your book about, is it really what you want, right? Or maybe how
Yeah,
about if I
well,
could
no,
get that? Yeah,
it's swinging back to something you said earlier about actions, and it may not be who you are. One of the things that I is a common conversation these days is, are you able to be yourself on the job? We actually have tests to determine how
yeah,
much of your natural behavior is being applied. But and so if you're acting too much on the stage
yeah,
in the job situation, you're really undergoing cultural dissonance. which means cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
You're not being yourself. And I
Uh,
think for leadership, it's particularly important to be able to be yourself. People, Kate mentioned just about thanks for being vulnerable. But, if I were heading a big organization, what would it mean for me to reveal all that I've revealed? And in some cases, that might not be acceptable to other executives in the organization who are my bosses.
yeah.
So it's really important to be able to, I think, be authentic with your friends
Yeah.
and family and those around you. The other thing
I
I'd like to mention
yeah.
about the subtitle confluence. Well, a lot of discussion these days about uh, you know work-life balance. And my feeling on that is that's what confluence is all about. They flow together.
Yeah.
You can't just say when the clock strikes 5, I'm in a different place in a different world. If you're a professional, if you have a manual job, perhaps that's true. But these days, unless you're learning all the time, uh, you're losing out in your profession.
Uh,
So in many of our jobs these days, you have to learn that intricate balance to make sure you can have balance between the two, but they're intertwined. They're not separate.
that's a great teaching moment, everybody, from Grant Tate about work-life balance and how he sees that. I like that other piece you said about continuous learning. Just want to put something on the screen here. We got another fan popping in. This is a LinkedIn user. Great conversation, guys. Inspiring to listen to add to Kay Monroe. Thanks both of you for open and authentic sharing. You see, Grant, I believe as leaders, we get more attention because we're being authentic. One of the things I wanted to say is Brene Brown, who is an American who does a lot of work on shame, vulnerability. I found that a while ago. It's kind of what's true. What you said is it's not acceptable in business, but part of my thing now is who cares? Like I'm on your side. Let's teach leaders to be vulnerable because, I remember in the movie Saving Private Ryan, if you ever saw, where Tom Hanks led his men up a hill to take a hill, and he knew he was going to lose most of them because they didn't have
Right.
cover. Afterwards, he went behind a rock and took his helmet off, sat down, and he wept,
Yes.
and he
Right.
cried. And
Yeah.
he didn't want to show his men that, but I would have loved to see him sit in front of him and start crying. Say, anybody feel that way? Because I got to cry.
Yeah.
And that's
And,
vulnerability.
and so the question that you brought up at the beginning, who am I? What's my role now?
Yeah.
If you've been acting on the stage too long, then you lose track of who you really are. Am I in that role? Is that me?
Yeah.
And you lose track of who you are yourself inside.
Yeah.
And so it's important to really take the time to say, what do I stand for?
I
What's my purpose in life? Who am I? What are the principles I believe in?
Oh, that's so insightful, everybody. A teaching moment on the show. And Grant did it through different things. He took a time to himself to reflect. He brought somebody into his circle, a therapist, so that he could talk through things and have somebody walk with him. And I really think that's a big part of it. Grant, they say the difference between, the difference between time and wisdom, knowledge is, how does it go? Uh, Wisdom is the difference between time and knowledge, or something like that. I screwed
Yeah.
that totally up. But I think that's why we need people like you in the world to go out after they've gone through this, because all the young people coming, my daughter 24, they need to hear this. They need to hear these stories so that they can find out who they are and do what they want. Here's another fan. Wow, you're a rock star today, man. Vulnerability is a foundational element of cultivating an atmosphere of trust in organizations everywhere, really. Jennifer
Well,
Till.
all my sisters are showing up today.
Okay, well, all right. Well,
Jennifer's another
yeah.
confidant that I've worked with, previous
Fantastic.
partner in the company, and they're all wonderful coaches and
Well,
trends.
It's a testament to who you are. So Grant, as we there's so much more we'll have to have you back that we could talk about. I mean, the stories in the book, every time I read one, I'm riffing the story back. And it's such a treasure, man. I'm so proud of you, because to come out and be a thought leader with your own story is the ultimate vulnerability. And this is a great book. Now we're going to have some fun. I promised you that I'd show you the dish I made. You want to see this? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Let's see if we can do this.
I was wondering what Canadians ate for Thanksgiving.
All right,
Especially on the West Coast.
All right. So,
Whoa.
shameless plug. I grew up at home trying to escape a violent home. And as I said, I went into business and did fairly well, but I cooked. And this is my love language. I can't cry. I can't express myself, but I cooked for everybody and I learned. So I made this plate, and it's basically rack of lamb, which was marinated in garlic and rosemary. Then I have glazed thin carrots and squash there, which I glazed and roasted in honey and butter. Also the sauce, and let me just turn the slide here. The sauce, oops, stole the sauce was basically all the drippings and mushrooms and beef stock put together. And
Great day. Wow.
so I'm going to tell you the truth about
Whoa.
what happens is I'm a visual mind. So I walk down, I live in a village setting, a beautiful part of our country here. And I went to my butcher and things. And after I read your book, I told you this, I was thinking about you, and I just see things and my brain says that. So you want to know some of the funny thoughts I had, Grant? I kept thinking about the darn word Tate. And so I said, I'm going to get cranberry sauce and put blood all over. It's like the Sharon Tate murders. And then I thought, well, I'm going to make taters. And I said, how corny is that going to be? Everybody can make taters. But here's a few things in this dish I want you to know. That's my love for you. One is the shoulder. I went looking for shoulder and was disappointed because they're out of lamb shoulder. And it was about the book, The Shoulder. But this is the rack. It's close enough. Secondly, if you know to put a rack like that and make it stand up like that, it is a metaphor about your life and mine and most people. It fell apart so many times when I was plating it. I had to be resilient. I had to believe in myself, and finally I got it to stand up. But that's not easy to do. And then when I looked at the colors on the plate, I was thinking about the colors, the beautiful colors. There's some dark and there's some light, spring and summer, and the seasons you went through, from growing up to being a successful person, having a marital breakdown, and rebounding, finding yourself. The picture next is about you, sir. You basically did things you'd never done before. And so I made my first cheesecake. This is Gordon Ramsay's recipe. There's a raspberry lemon cheese. And I was afraid to do it because there was so much to making it perfect. It came out really well. But the resilience you have in doing things, especially being in corporate and being patient, when you make a cheesecake, by the way, you have to, when it's done in the oven, leave it for an hour with the oven cracked. Then you have to bring it out for another 2 hours to cool to room temperature. Then you have to put it in the fridge for 4 hours so it tightens, and they say overnight. My lesson learned here, which I really learned, was, you think it's what you learn after you know it all that makes a difference, which is what your message was. I screwed up because I wanted this for the dinner. I didn't read the instructions, so I didn't serve this till the next day. But we still found a way. We still found a way to celebrate it. And there's the rack. And I thought about, if you know about Frenching, where they cut off the bones. This is basically what I saw as part of your story. You literally had your skin, taken down, and everything taken out of you by this world you built around you, where it led you to have to go back. And then out of this came the beautiful final picture, the real creation. This one is my last one. To make gravy, you take all the stuff, drippings, onions, and you put it in a sieve. It's basically rebuilding yourself. It's taking you and pulverizing. You have to go through all this pain and things, and you don't know what's going to come out. Then at the end, there it is, this beautiful mushroom gravy that I put a little cream in, a little butter to finish it off. And that is you. That is you. So
what a wonderful story, Tom. Wow.
So I will be sending you those pictures, and I want to wrap this up with a couple quick things. You see on the screen behind me there's a picture of that challenge coin. They're created in World War I. People carry them in their pockets in the war to commit to each other. Challenge coins were to create community. And so when I created my show, I wanted to have an award for people, only people who would come on and tell their whole stories and show us how they took their life to basically do something positive for others. So I'm inducting you into the Quiet Warrior Tribe today. There's
wonderful.
about 250 people of all sorts across the world that are carrying these. So I want you to know you're now part of that thread. And then we just put a little bit of a congratulations on the screen there to you.
Yeah, great. Wow. Thank you so much. Wow.
Yeah, that'll be coming to you. And then also as I'm interviewing, I write these words down, and I wrote it actually inside your book. These are leadership words, and humility, courage, wisdom, and the one that really comes out of you is love. Everything you do is from a point of love, even though you're a sinner. I'm just kidding. So Grant, we're gonna let you have the last word here. So why don't you say anything you want to say? Any word of wisdom?
I guess a couple of things that occur to me. One is that life is a learning experience. We have to look at every experience, every incident as what did I learn from that? Developing new relationships, developing new understanding. And so getting to the end of the book is not the end, it's continuing. And I'm continuing to learn things about me, and I'm continuing to learn things about others. The other thing about going back to what David Brooks said, he said when people encounter that worst challenge at the lowest part of the valley, they're people that turn to transformation to become a different person and set off on a new path. And there are others who descend into bitterness. And reading his book, I said to myself, what is the difference? How can you determine? My current answer to that is the difference is those who reach out to others for help and listen and learn from others and pull people close to you. Then you can start on the upward path. If you're on the other hand, you're rejecting them, putting a hand in their face, then you're lost.
Oh, that's thank you so much. Teaching moment on the show. Everybody come back and listen to this last part just for that awesome words of wisdom. Handsontheshoulder.com. That's your website. And again, I'm going to plug this, ask you to everybody. And Grant, I'm announcing today that I've written a 5-star review, which will be posted up, and we'll be factoring that into the production of this show. And
thank you.
You're welcome. Just being a pleasure having you on the show. So thank you for being here.
It's a real pleasure, John. It's a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Grant. And everybody, find that true purpose like Grant's taught us today. Find that passion and bring it into your life and live the life that you deserve and desire.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca